Hello, so I'll be presenting to you today my comparative essay between the novel Beautiful Boy and Basketball Diaries. So we need to know a little bit about the works before I am going to go on and speak a bit about what I'm going to be proving through this presentation. So to start, I read the novel Beautiful Boy, so a father's journey through a son's addiction. So it was published on February 26th of the year 2008, and it was a New York Times bestseller. It basically follows the story of Nick Sheff, which is the son of David Sheff, and his whole pathway through meth addiction and how the whole family suffered through this and how they got out of it. And then the film that I watched was Basketball Diaries. So this film was published in 1995, and it was a bibliographical crime drama film, which was produced by Liz Heller. And it basically follows the story of Jim Carroll, which is played by Leonardo DiCaprio in this movie. And just it follows him going through also his addiction and a little bit, it shows a little bit of the way his family reacted to everything that was going on and how he got out of it as well. And then to proceed, my thesis is an American teen methamphetamine addict's family will suffer more than the user because of financial instability and abuse, which directly elevates dramatic levels of emotional distress. So, we need to know a little bit the science behind methamphetamine itself. So, basically, the way this drug works is that it elevates dopamine levels in your brain, which is dopamine in your brain is used when it's basically the pleasure hormone in your brain. It encourages you when you do good things and stuff like that. So you also get a high up to 48 hours, which is a very long high compared to other drugs. You get a severe high for 2 hours, and then you're probably having a stable high for almost 2 days. And once you get off that high, you become paranoid, you start tweaking, you become very destructive. So in 2017, it is important to note that there were in the United States 70,237 deaths, and 15% of those were related to meth. And also an important number to know is that there were 90, it's believed, it's thought that there are 964,000 people above the age of 12 that do use this kind of drug in the US. So when it comes to financial instabilities, and we compare it to the novel and the movie, we can see on the pages 257, 275, and 120 in the novel, where it says Nick on several occasions shows up high at work, loses his job, or calls again high asking for money. And then in the film, we see what you got to do is give me some money. I need to get out of town for a while. And also, Jim does say, Mom, I'm in pain. So we see the financial instability in the Chef family's life. They're a very comfortable and wealthy family. So the financial struggle for them isn't as stressful, but you see that Nick depends on his family to survive because all the money that he's making or he was making when he had his job was going towards drug, and now that he doesn't have a job, now his family has to pay for the way he decides to live. When it comes to the Carroll family, um, the mother is a single mother, so you see the instability in their life when it comes to just the way the house is, the neighborhood it is in. You see prostitutes in the movie running around town just in front of their homes, and you see kids on the street doing drugs. And you see that Nick too, on the time slot 1 hour, 30 minutes, and 30 seconds, that he too is asking for his mother for financial help because he isn't able to do it anymore on his own. So then there's also the abuse. You'll see that the addict will inflict verbal abuse, emotional and physical abuse to their families. So we see on the page 146 where Nick says, Mr. Chef says that the addicts bring them up, being the past problems, to induce guilt, a tool which manipulates others in pursuit of their continued addiction. So Nick is really exploiting his parents emotionally and verbally. He needs things, and he's gonna So he really just wants to get exactly what he needs to survive, and he'll do anything, even if it means to hurt his family and parents. And when on the time slot 39:56, um, Jim, like himself, when he's high, he comes home and his mom finds him. He tells his mom when she's kind of freaking out at him. He goes and says, "Go clean toilets or whatever it is you do, and when you're done, you can clean this one." You can see the hurt all over his mother's face because she's always tried to do her best for Jim, and like she's always wanted to support him. And now that this is going on and that he says this, like just the hurt on her face was very it was a very well pictured scene by the actors. It really showed the emotion that a family would feel if someone heard this. And he also said on the time slot 1 hour, 14 minutes and 33 seconds, I need to get out of here. Give it to me. I'll cut your fucking throat. So, excuse the language, but this is the quote from the film when Nick and his friend Reggie are together, and Reggie saves him from the snow when he's freezing to death and brings him into his home, and Reggie takes his drugs. And Jim at this point is kind of freaking out. He's tweaking. He hasn't had his fix in like 48 hours, so he's really struggling. He's losing his mind a little bit, but just the aggressiveness and the physical violence. He also later goes on to beat his friend in pursuit to try and take the drugs. And in the book, on page 160, it says that the like she was horror struck. So basically, what they're in rehab, and rehab being very expensive, I should have mentioned earlier, is very hard for Americans to pay for. But a woman is going to visit her husband, and he has just been told that he's able to leave soon, and she's just in terror because this her husband, this man, um, beat her unconscious right before getting into rehab, and you can see that she was just traumatized by the whole event that ever happened. So then if this loads. What do these things cause to the family? So basically, we see that it causes immense emotional distress because of certain emotions such as hope. So David Sheff says, one moment a spark of hope gleams, the next a sea of despair, rage, and always the pain, always the anguish, always the same thing. And also on page 109, where it says, the more you learn about such a drug, the more you hope, the more it destroys you. Sorry, I can't really read the last line because there's something covering it, but basically that's what it's saying. And you can just see that it's really a roller coaster. Sometimes Nick would be perfectly okay and then he'd relapse again, which this drug is known to do because it really plays with your brain. So relapse is basically known to be a very important step in recovery, but it's a very, very hard thing for a family to watch because they see that their son wants to get better. They see that he wants to get improved, and then there's just a crash where he goes right back into the streets and decides that drugs is what he's going to do, and that's it. And then his mother, for Jim Carroll, timestamp 1 hour 17 minutes and 20 seconds, says, this is Jim that's saying this, I need a little something, it hurts, I gotta go, I gotta see my mom, it hurts. um, you can see that, so this is the time where Reggie and his friend and Jim are together, and Reggie won't let Jim leave until he has, because he's basically at this point drooling and almost seizing because his body is in so much pain because it's so used to the high levels of drug in his system. So his body's being kind of like traumatized. And there's also, it's important to state the next quote that it's once upon a time somebody helped me, which was on timestamp 1 hour 15 minutes and 18 seconds. And Reggie says this and doesn't let Jim go because he himself had been through a whole process of and drug issue and getting and improving better. So he really holds on to trying to help Nick, and the disappointment that he has when Jim um, goes out of his way and leaves him and decides to go back in the streets is completely traumatizing to him, and it hurts him and it hurts his whole family. Like they're trying their best to support them, but the hope and the loss of the hope, the constant roller coaster is really destructive to someone's emotions. So the next emotion that someone will feel when going through this whole mess is confusion and denial. We see that in the novel Beautiful Boy, that David Sheff says we deny severity of our loved ones' problems not because we are naive, but because we can't know. And this was, sorry, on page 15, which I had it marked down. But it's very, like, the denial and the confusion is they don't want to hurt, they don't want to know that there's an issue, because they want to try so hard and believe so hard that their child is everything and okay and perfect, and they don't want to know that they're hurting and that they can't do anything about it. And also on page 129, he says they, the children, being stared at me, the father, sad and uncomprehending, they both wailed. So Nick has two siblings, and they're very confused of the situation, first of all, because they aren't old enough to understand what is going on, but also to see the way and the state their brother is in, all the anger, all the tweaking, all the impatientness, and all the stealing. It's very traumatizing to a child, and it's very confusing. And oftentimes we will see that children will believe that it's actually their fault that everything is going on. So it causes many, like, severe issues that can affect the children later on in the future as well. So on the timestamp 40 minutes and 22 seconds of Basketball Diaries, the mom says to Jim, "What's the matter with you? I don't know you. I don't believe this. This is you." And something similar is said multiple times also in the novel that's very similar to this. And it's just, the family just doesn't understand the situations their sons or daughters are in. It's really traumatizing, and they don't want to believe it. They don't want to believe that their children are on drugs and that they've been consumed that by this one little product that can change their lives and everybody's lives. um, and she says to, or sorry, Reggie, later on when they're together after he pulled him out of the snow, says, "Who the hell wants you to suck their dick?" And his face, he's completely traumatized, because at this point, this is right after they got into their fight, and Reggie goes to fix his shirt, and Jim is pressed against the wall, and he says this, and Reggie realizes at what point Jim has actually fallen down this rabbit hole. Like, he hasn't realized how bad everything has been. He didn't want to know how bad it was. So just this confusion and denial adds a little bit to the hope that people feel, because it's just a whole emotional roller coaster. It's up and down, and it's just, there's hope, there's confusion. People want to know what's going on, but they don't want to know. They want to be there for the people they love, and sometimes they realize that when it comes to drugs, they can't do anything for the person unless the person wants help. And then this comes to the helplessness and desperation. Like I was saying, that um, people realize that they can't help the ones they love unless they choose to be helped, and that they want to get better. So on page 242, Mr. Chef says, "I want to remove him, but he's there even after this hemorrhage." So basically, Mr. Chef got a brain hemorrhage, and the only thing, when he's in the hospital, he doesn't remember his name, he doesn't remember his native date of birth, he doesn't remember, like, where he lives. The only thing he can remember is his son's addiction. He can remember that Nick is in the streets somewhere getting high, that there's something wrong, and he's basically consumed by it. And Mr. Chef also says on page 197, "I prayed, pleading with a God I have never believed in." So he's going to certain extents because he's so desperate, he's helpless, he feels like he can't do anything. So he's trying to do anything he can to actually help his son, because he truly loves him and wants to support him. And and we also see in the film, when it comes to Jim, one of his friends from school says to him, "It used to be about getting high and playing basketball. Now it's just about getting high with you. You're blowing it." And the thing is, Jim is also depending on a scholarship, which comes with also the financial instability. He's depending on a scholarship to be able to go to school, and do post-secondary studies. And his friend is realizing this and trying to tell him, like, this is his last desperate measure in the hallways when he sees Jim taking the drugs. He's trying to tell him, and he's a very, very like conservative person. He keeps everything to himself. So the fact that he speaks up to Jim and tells him what he's feeling just shows at what point that it's gotten to and how bad it's been. And the mother also says, "Don't you others understand? I can't watch you kill yourself." Um, because she sees the drugs. This is when she kicks him out of the house. She can't deal with the fact of seeing this. She knows that she can't help him, and she knows that she doesn't have the financial capacities to be able to get him to rehab. And it's basically her. She's torn apart. She's crying. She's screaming this to him from the balcony. The desperation is there because she knows that she can't help the one that she loves. She knows that she can't help her son. Next slide. And then when it comes to, there's also health dangers that come with the drugs for the addicts and also the ones that they love. So basically, I want to just show you the effects that meth have on someone's brain when they use it. So you can see that a normal brain, you can see the redness. The more red and the brighter the colors are, the more active the brain is. So the redness, you can see that there's activity everywhere in the center of the brain where the brain is functioning. And then you see that meth user, the brain is actually not functioning to its full capacity like it used to. And I find it very interesting because I looked at one of the um, the images that we're taking through X-ray and stuff like that, that if you look at a depressed brain and a non-depressed brain, you can see that the activity, these are two different scans, so it's the colors are different and things like that, but you can grasp the concept. A non-depressed brain has a lot of more activity. Like you can see all the bright colors and everything. And when it comes to a depressed brain, there's only little sections and parts of it that are actually properly functioning. So if I go back and you look at the methamphetamine abuser's brain and the depressed brain, you can see that there's some similarities, not in where the activity is, but how much activity there actually in the brain, which is absolutely stunning. And Mr. Chef did some research too when it came to the book, and there's a whole couple pages where he discusses with a brain someone who specializes in the brain with meth addicts, that says that brain damage can actually uh, happen in less than a couple weeks of using the drug, and it can take years and years before the brain actually goes back to normal, going to a normal control brain or a non-depressed brain. And it's the same thing for depression. It takes time to be able to change the brain into the structure. Like you even see holes in where the brain is, and later on there's also little holes here where there's the darker patches. So it's incredible what a drug and depression, which most of the families and individuals that have addicts in their family will have, saying like this woman who was abused by her husband, she will probably be suffering of depression for the rest of her life if she doesn't go and get herself treated. And this is also something else, that it's not only that you're paying for rehab when it comes to your children taking drugs, but you have to be able to find yourself some help because of all the traumatic experiences you live. The next thing is also a spread of diseases. Because of the needles that are being used to inject meth, or just the meth, the crack houses and everything where all of this is happening is really dirty. They tend to be in not the nicest areas, and just this whole, the injections going into the blood and just transmitted through sex and stuff like this, it can cause an effect on loved ones, because blood can be contacted through someone you love, like a bloody nose and you have a cut on your hand, or just sexually transferring it to your partner, and it can be really, really devastating to family and can cost the loved ones their lives. And then this leads me to just come to a conclusion that as much as an addict does suffer when it comes to the uses of drugs and the effects it has on their mental and the physical, a family who is who has a meth addict in their family will suffer more because of the financial instability, because of the support they have to give him and the emotional distress that they feel through different emotions and the abuse that they feel, will actually impact more those around the addict than the addict themselves. And David Sheff states very clearly, and it was perfectly said, I believe, that caring about an addict is a complex and fraught, debilitating as addiction itself. And it's very true because he also does say, at the beginning of the novel, at least high as a momentary respite from the addiction suffering. So you can see that they suffer almost equally, but the fact that the addict has a way to escape these issues, escaping through the drugs and the 48-hour high that he can have, and the vicious cycle it has, he can constantly stay high and be able to forget of all the bad things that he's feeling. He can run away from it. The family has to deal with supporting him with all the destruction that he brings to the family and have to stay strong and have no way to escape it but to live through it every day and talk to someone. That's the only way that they can try and heal their own wounds if they themselves don't decide to fall into drugs as well. So I'd like to thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you very much.